Hey guys, this is Tony from Paintball, and today I'm going to go over how to maintain, maintenance, and troubleshoot your Tippmann 98 Custom. Alright guys, first off what I'm going to do here is I'm obviously going to take the screws out of the gun, the main body screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of them. You use your 1/8 inch Allen wrench, and that's going to take these screws out for you. So here we go. Basically, while I'm doing this, I'm kind of going to talk the main problems with the 98 Custom. Since we use these as our rental guns, the main thing, problems with either the gun's leaking or the gun sputters or there's 16 paintballs in my barrel. How do I fix that? So I'm going to be taking this. This is a brand new 98 Custom apart, and I'm going to kind of go over the, obviously the main problems that that people bring to me to get fixed. So, taking all the body screws out, I'm going to actually remove the barrel and remove your feed neck, pressing the latch, and then off to the side. Alright guys, so 2 more screws left. Then we're going to crack these. This is the double shell, which is the Tippmann ACT here. So it does have the anti-chop technology. Pull your back half off. The front half will come off as well, and then you also have your foregrip that you can slide that in. Once you reassemble the gun, this can go in last. Alright guys, the main thing is here, if your gun is sputtering, I'm going to kind of go over a couple of the parts so you can be familiar with them as to diagnosing the issues yourself. So if your gun is sputtering, or if your gun's not returning, either A, it's going to be your trigger sear, which is going to be this piece right here. So you've got your spring, your trigger spring, or your sear spring, and then your actual sear as well. So this is this piece right here. Trigger sear, and you got the spring that goes along with that. Back here, since this is the ACT model, up top is your ACT spring for the anti-chop, and then down below, right here with your metal spring guide, is the actual mainspring for the gun. So right on the inside, you have your buffer O-ring here, and then you have your actual spring guide that sits inside the main body spring, sits in there just like that. Set that off to the side. Now guys, we have your hammer. If your gun is sputtering, either you're going to want to check your trigger sear here on the back where it actually catches into the hammer. You'll notice there's going to be some indentations or wear and tear on your sear. So if you do see that, you're just going to want to replace your sear and obviously just get a new one. Now here where I'm pointing to now is your silver hammer. This is the hammer for the gun. This is what actually hits your valve and opens up airflow to the bolt. So this is your hammer. Once again, if your gun, you pull it back and the gun shoots once and goes forward and doesn't recock automatically like it's supposed to, there's this white O-ring that sits right on this hammer. You're going to want to replace that because it's just seeing too much wear, too much tear, and it's not allowing the correct seal with blowback pressure to continuously put your gun back to where it needs to be. So once again, if your gun's sputtering, check your trigger sear. If your trigger sear is fine, next thing you need to do is go to your hammer O-ring that sits right on the front end of this silver piece that I'm showing you. That's the real basics of the 98 Custom. They're very simple guns, and we'll move on to the next thing. So now you have here is your black power tube, which your bolt actually slides back and forth on. Inside of this black power tube is your valve. This is the main mechanism of the entire gun. So basically this valve sits inside of this black power tube, and your hammer, which is right over here, every time you pull that trigger, this hammer hits this spring on the valve and opens up airflow into the gun. So constantly, boom, 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 this hammer is hitting your valve, which is sitting inside of your black power tube. Now, with that being said, on this black power tube is this long stem. This is what your bolt rides back and forth on. Every time the gun recoils, here, back again, back and forth, back and forth. And normally, there's just a small O-ring on the front of your bolt that rarely ever goes bad. I wouldn't worry about that one too much. The biggest components, trigger sear, hammer, and then lastly, I'm going to go over troubleshooting issues is this orange ball detent piece that a lot of people seem to have issues with. This is the orange ball detent piece right here. This is what stops extra paintballs from loading into your barrel. So it's only one at a time as opposed to 5 to 10 at a time if they're rolling past this piece. A lot of people, if they take their gun apart for a separate issue other than their ball detent change, sometimes they put this piece in backwards. Always make sure the opening on the ball detent is facing outward of the gun, so your bolt can roll right over top of it without any issues. If you put it in the other way, your bolt's going to stop halfway and your gun's not going to function and you're going to say, my gun's broke. But the biggest thing is your ball detent's backward. Your gun's not broke, you just put it in backwards. Always make sure the face of this ball detent, the opening, is facing outward towards the barrel. Lastly, before I get this gun reassembled, I'm going to say up top, when you do take this gun apart, there is your, it's your sight latch and your U, it's like a U-shaped, I call it the horseshoe spring that sits up in front for your actual elbow to latch in and latch out of. Make sure you always, when I work on these, I've done it so many times, I get the whole gun back together and I realize, man, I didn't put the pin or the spring back in my latch, and I've got to take the whole gun apart again to get it in correctly. So the trigger shoe, there's a little trigger shoe spring that sits right underneath this latch. And then you always want to make sure that the actual U of the spring is facing inwards towards the bolt. So that obviously you can push the latch up and down, everything will lock into place. And then obviously you have your main mechanism arm here. This is called your linkage arm. It links your front bolt to your hammer. So I'm going to get this hammer thrown back in here. As going back to the valve, a lot of people will come in and say, okay, now my gun is leaking. The only place that this gun is going to leak from is your valve piece right here, once again, that sits inside of your power tube. Your valve is the only thing on this gun that is holding air. The only thing that would leak on this gun is going to be this valve. It's not a piranha, it's not a spider, it doesn't have a cup seal. So this is your valve. If your gun is leaking down the barrel, 100% your valve, and you're going to need to get it replaced. Normally they run $30 or so, just a rough estimate. Once again, if your gun is leaking, if it's a 98 custom, it's going to be your valve that sits inside of this black power tube. Before I actually put that away, maintenance on this, if you want to keep kind of the O-rings inside the valve fresh, you don't have to buy a brand new one. A couple drops of oil right here. Every couple times you play, you can run it straight through your ASA line, right up into the valve that's sitting inside of the black power tube. So this piece is literally sitting inside of here, and then you can do a couple drops of oil through your ASA. That'll run up through the gun. So now I'm going to get this thing reassembled again, kind of go over the basics. Go up front. Let's make sure your sight latch and the U-horse spring is sitting in there. Let's make sure your ball detent is in the right position, installed underneath the bolt, facing outwards. So you always want that outward so it's not jamming up the gun and not allowing it to shoot. Getting this assembled back, obviously, I did the ball detent. You want to make sure your bolt's on the right way. So clearly, if you're looking at it, this is going to slide back and forth, back and forth. You don't want to put it on the reverse way, or else obviously your paint's not going to fly and the gun won't shoot. So make sure that where the linkage arm connects to the bolt is in the furthest back position, not the other way around. So we'll put that back in here. Make sure your actual spring guide in the main body spring, put your bumper back on right over top. And since this is the ACT model, once again, make sure your ACT is lined up here. Slide that back in. Or I think the ACT is actually going in this way. Right, there we go. Finally got the ACT back in there. Yeah, she's tricky. All right, guys, now that I got the ACT put back in there, you're going to install this trigger sear back in here. Don't ever forget your trigger sear spring. That's going to provide the back push against the hammer when you cock the gun back. So sear, trigger sear spring. It's going to go in there nice and tight. Like I said, you can always put on the front handle afterwards after you get the gun assembled. So that just slides in place. Back cap, mainspring, ACT spring, your bumper O-ring sits back here. Trigger sear spring, your hammer, your power tube, your linkage arm, bolt and ball detent up front. All right, guys, when making sure to get this thing back together right, you got to make sure this front piece is all the way secured and fastened, obviously with this alternating line here with the nut, the compression fitting into the valve. Sometimes the silver nut that sits right behind here gets in the way. You got to make sure this plate is correctly in there. Everything's nice, snug, and tight fit so your back half can come onto the gun. Now, since this is the newer model, this is the ACT model, this is the newest one they make. The old style 98 Customs, it was all one piece shell. It wasn't two separate halves like this. It didn't have the extra ACT spring. So basically the older model, in my opinion, was easier because you have one shell. You don't have to worry about fitting one piece into with two pieces. It was all one shell, same internals, same stuff to work on, same troubleshooting issues. So whether you have the new style 98 Custom or the Model 98 or the Custom 98, all of the internal pieces like the valve, the sear, the hammer, the ball detent, they're all going to be interchangeable. They're all going to give you the same problems, and you can troubleshoot them both the same way, whether the oldest model or the newest model. I'm just trying to get this one back together here, obviously, for you. And like I said, back to the alternating screws. Make sure you do one in the center, one in the back half, one back up in the front. Make sure everything is locked down nice and tight. Not too tight though, obviously. You don't want to A, strip something, or B, if it's too tight, the gun's not going to function properly. Once again, once I get this thing back together, I'm going to go over a brief troubleshooting session once again, just to close off with it. I got all these screws nice and tight on here now. Gun functions, and like I said, you can always wait to the very end to throw back on the front grip because that just slides right into place. And you don't have to make sure that's in there beforehand, so that'll slide right on into there, and you can drop your screw back in. So as I'm screwing this last one in, once again, if you come on in or if you're at home and you're saying my gun is leaking, it's going to be your valve. You're going to need to bring it to your local shop or order a valve and try to install it yourself via watching videos just like this one. If your gun is sputtering, something like that, you're going to want to either check your trigger sear or check the O-ring on your hammer. If your gun is loading more than one paintball in the barrel at a time, it's going to be the orange ball detent piece that sits right at the front of the gun, right underneath the bolt. Other than that, if velocity-wise, if you're not getting good velocity, you can't get up to speed, it's either A, going to be your mainspring that's worn down over time. The mainspring is the one with that golden spring guide that sits right here near the back of the gun. Or also check, there's a velocity adjustment screw that runs into the valve, basically right through the power tube. Something like that, if you have this screw that sits in here backed too far in, the gun's getting no airflow. That's going to be restricting the velocity on the gun. Always make sure that's backed out a couple turns, and then always make sure to chrono the gun to make sure it's within safe field speed. So basically that was just a quick breakdown. Taking apart the gun, I showed you the different parts, the sear, the ball detent, the hammer, the linkage arm, the bolt, everything like that. And hopefully this will help you out in the future if you need to troubleshoot your 98 Custom. Put something in the comments below if you want other guns for me to kind of just do a brief overview of. And once again, this is the Tippmann 98 Custom quick maintenance and troubleshooting video for you guys. Don't forget also to visit our website at lonewolfpaintball.com to pick up shirts. We've got hoodies, zip-ups, t-shirts, all sorts of Lone Wolf swag per se. And check out the website, lonewolfpaintball.com. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a good one.